Oh, hi, everybody. Thanks for dropping by. Today, we're going to be talking about seances with a couple out of Maryland, which is right across the continent from me and a little bit to the south. If you're familiar with the map of North America, Maryland's basically it's Baltimore, the East Coast, and I think it's north of Pennsylvania, just by Virginia, West Virginia in there. Back in the day, Maryland and Virginia gave up a chunk of land, and that land was used for the District of Columbia, and that's where the capital of the United States is. So if you can picture that in your head, that's where this couple lives. This is Kat and Dan Eckhart. You can go to their website, theeckharts.com. It's Eckhart is spelled Eckharts, theeckharts.com, and they actually go out and do seances. And I don't mean like weird stuff with tipping tables and all that. They actually drill down into using seances to communicate to dead people. Just like some people will use a Ouija board or whatever else. If you think about it, and we talk about this, I know paranormal investigators would say, oh, no, we're not going to do a seance. That's kind of creepy, sitting around and wanting dead people to talk to us. But we'll rather go to an old hospital somewhere and sit on the floor and then ask dead people to talk to us. But that's not a seance. That's a scientific paranormal investigation. Yeah, sure it is. Anyway, we're going to talk to Dan and Kat Eckhart about their seances and how they got into it, what they do, and how you could actually be involved in one, because they can literally do these things online because, it's the Google net. We can do that kind of thing now. And they also do readings too for people. So if you go to their website and you're interested, you can always get a reading done through them. Again, theeckharts.com. Very interesting kind of way the couple had got into the woo-woo side of things. Now, Dan, as a teenager, was on a vacation with his parents, and it was pouring rain, so they weren't going to go to the beach or whatever they were supposed to be doing. So he's wandering around this town, and he walks into an old bookstore, and you can just kind of imagine this old dusty bookstore with piles of books everywhere, and stuff in the back room hasn't had time to be placed on the shelves. The owner is probably, in my head, the owner is always this little hunchback 90-year-old guy with bifocals walking around bumping into things, but who knows what this bookstore was really like. And Dan's walking around, he bumped a small pile of books, and one flips over, and it's this really old, dusty, yellow page, falling apart book, and it's filled with astrological signs and symbols and pictures of elemental beings and things. And he's a teenager on this rainy day, and he takes this book and buys it and starts reading it while on the vacation, which lends him into this idea that these things exist, and I can possibly look a little bit more into this, because I've been seeing shadows all my life. We did live in a haunted house, and we get into that too, but that is how he got switched on to wondering what the heck was going on the other side of the veil, so to speak. Now, Kat, her experience that kind of opened her eyes was she had a dream, and she had a dream of a room, just basically a room, kind of an Art Nouveau kind of architecture. There was a red chair in the middle of this room, and there was a chair facing a fireplace, and there was a woman sitting in this chair just staring at the fire. And Kat, in her dream, walked up, and she realized that this woman, though in a dream, was more realistic and just not your basic character you would have in your a regular dream. It was something special about this person. And she started speaking to Kat, and from that point, everything, after she had spoken to Kat, everything just disappeared. The whole thing shut down, off you went. Well, over time, Kat has been able to communicate with this person, not only in dream space, but while awake, and communicate this to this person and get information, and at will be able to communicate with this woman who is now friends with hers on the other side. And that's part of her connection to the other side of the veil and through her readings and their experiences. So Kat and Dan set up seances. You could go to their lectures. They do talks all over the Maryland area. And because it's such a kind of a tight little space, I'm sure they'll bounce into DC and they'll go into the Virginias and Pennsylvania and bounce around. So if you have an event out in that area in the Northeast part of the United States, and you want a couple of speakers to come by, check them out, Eckharts.com, and give them a shout, and they'll come out and do talks on seances and readings and paranormal this and paranormal that, and the stuff that we are going to talk to them about tonight. So I am going to go get Liam to start up the show. And after that, you'll go see where Kat and Dan are, and we'll drag them in kicking and screaming to talk about seances. Okay, talk to you later. Liam, off you go.
I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one.
Thank you, Liam. And thank you, everybody, who's dropping by. Today, I am with Kat and Dan. How you guys doing?
Very good. How are you?
Well,
That's good, because here on the lower left Canadian coast, it's drizzly in June. I hope you guys have got spring and summer blossoming and good weather where you are.
Yes, hot and cicadas. Cicadas everywhere.
I heard that they were like a plague of them or something. They were. It's like the cicadas wanted to be locusts or something. They were watching too much biblical TV. Yeah.
Yes, there's just thick clouds of them everywhere, and driving is no fun.
No. Oh, yeah. And I have some friends who don't do flying bugs at all. Like if anything's bigger than a gnat, they're get it away. And I said, sir, just sit down. It's going to be fine. So your website, theeckharts.com, that's Eckharts, Eckharts.
That's correct.
And for those of you playing along at home, why don't you go by theeckharts.com and see what they're up to. Now, what I found was really interesting is that what you guys have kind of found yourself involved in kind of parallels to on this weird fascination with the paranormal that's happened in the last 15 years. But let's go back and how you actually flipped your switch. How did you get involved in this?
Ooh, that's a great question. For me, it was profoundly personal. And I guess for both of us, it's kind of intertwined. But I grew up in what I would today refer to as a haunted house. There was a lot of weird activity, a lot of strange, like high strangeness kind of activity, coupled with terrifying nighttime like encounters, and an obsession with the paranormal from pretty much as far back as I can remember. My great uncle bought me a set of those books like Mysteries of the 20th Century. And the aliens and pyramids one terrified me. And there was stuff in there about ghosts and stuff. It was like a Reader's Digest thing. It terrified me, but it was one of those terrifying things that you can't look away from. So I spent all of my time kind of like obsessing over this book, but then also having these terrifying experiences. And from the outset, the lens by which I viewed the world and grew up in was one that was very biblically oriented, very like everything is demons kind of approach to the paranormal. So as you can imagine, that was terrifying. This started in like early middle school all the way up through college. And then once I was in college, began to really delve into, well, what could this possibly be outside of the lens of just, oh, this is nighttime encounters with scary demons. And that kind of brought me into the world of the occult and the world of this kind of hidden universe, this hidden whole realm of experiences people were having that lined up with my own, that didn't have to be terrifying. But Kat was interwoven into all of that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd always been interested in spirituality and religion, and my undergrad was in psychology. I studied anthropology. So those, I think, interests really brought me into the paranormal and interest in the paranormal. So after we first met, I went to his home one day and we walked into his bedroom. He was showing me his childhood bedroom.
And I had never told her anything about my experiences because, frankly, they sounded crazy. And I was trying to impress her, not sound like a lunatic.
Yes, did not want to scare me off. A twist to that, I was into psychology, so I would have just been interested. That's a digression. So we walked into his room and I turned around and I saw a tall shadow-like entity like lurking in the doorway, and it really scared me. So I looked away because it was too much. And I looked back and I could no longer see it, but I could feel that it was there. It was very heavy. It was very oppressive. And this was my first experience with something that was negative and something that I saw with my eyes, however briefly. And I was very scared. I kind of went into a panic, and my interpretation of it at the time was, I just had a random hallucination. What's wrong with me? And so I, talked to Dan. I told him about it immediately because obviously I was freaking out for some reason. And now looking back on it, and after we both kind of had more learning in the occult, learning in the paranormal world, I am able to contextualize that experience and understand what it might have been, which could be like a thought form or something like that.
Exactly. So within this scope of encounter, we had this moment that I think a lot of people have when they first enter into the world of whether it be magic or paranormal investigation. There's one particular moment where it seems like, oh, wait a second, this is all real and there's more going on here. And I am now just kind of stepping into it for the first time. So as we began to explore these things, get, of course, very interested in hauntings and read the literature, then we became really interested in this idea of the seance. And particularly viewing the seance as ritual, because we both do engage in and practice magic. So looking at seance as a form of ritual for people to engage with really allows everyone to have this kind of immersive experience, which we can then kind of just catalog or observe. And for Kat and I, we like to move the focus away from necessarily receiving messages or experiencing those pieces of intent or those messages with perhaps a clear meaning. Not that those things don't happen, but for us, it's about creating a ritual circle where we can experience strange things, allow the liminal space to kind of take over, and then see what comes through, see what happens.
It's been interesting. I was on some paranormal teams, and we're sitting around, 4 or 5 of us in a room, in a semicircular circle, with our little recorders, trying to communicate with a dead person. Mm-hmm. And I had asked them earlier, I said, "You guys ever want to do a seance?" "Oh, no. Seances are weird. Seances are creepy." And I said, "So, sitting in a circle wanting to talk to dead people, that would be creepy?" That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
we're just not at a table, and it's not structured that way. It's just loose and we're all sitting down. So really, what's the difference? Other than structure, of course.
Exactly. That's a great question. And I think that when we think about seance, it's kind of fallen into the same space that the Ouija board has fallen into, where it started as something that looks somewhat different than how we would imagine it to look. For example, the seance didn't start as something creepy or scary or terrifying. It looked like a lot of different things. It looked like people sitting in their basements, like, you know, trying to reach out to the spirit world. It looked like sitting in churches and singing hymns together and waiting for spirit to come and move people to speak with the dead. It looked like pretty much whatever people wanted it to look like, until we move into this era of like film and motion pictures and pop culture, and the seance becomes something out of the Conjuring films or something out of Sam Raimi movies, as this kind of scary space where we're just waiting for bad things to happen and come through. There's this idea that you need a medium, and while Kat and I are both certainly mediums, everyone in the circle who's conducting a seance experiences strange things. They're often surprised at the fact that they're not, or wouldn't consider themselves to be mediums, and yet they're hearing people whisper in their ear, or they're feeling something touch them, or they're noticing changes in temperature, or there's physical movement happening with pendulums or something like that. And I think that's been a real big focus for us, is kind of moving this conversation away from, this doesn't need to look like someone in a Victorian dress or a Victorian outfit calling down gauzy ghosts. This can look like a ritual, like an intentional circle, a place to sit and to experience.
You know, Kat, if we go to your website, you have 7 parts of a seance. And one of those things is you know, basically coming in with intent. Mm-hmm. And I find, and from speaking to a friend of mine, Karen A. Dahlman, who's a Ouija board expert goddess kind of lady. I call her a goddess. She doesn't call herself a goddess. She's been doing Ouija boards forever. It comes down to, with the Ouija board, it comes down to your intent at the beginning.
That's exactly right.
You don't just open the door. It would be like opening, I describe it as like opening a new store in a mall. Once you've opened your door, everybody comes in. You don't really have a choice, but she keeps harping on the intent. Make sure that your intent is positive, pure, and good, and then there's a number of other, you know, bits to the puzzle, not the puzzle, to the structure of your seance that I read that all feeds the intent and protects yourself. Can you kind of go over a bit of that, the 7 steps, or right off the top of your head, like just a few of the parts of the seance that that you guys put on?
Oh, absolutely. And you spoke to intent first. I think that is one of the first steps. It really depends on where you're having the seance, who you're planning on inviting to that experience with you, and where it will take place and why. The why is pretty important when you're going to be contacting the dead. Not only because, as you said, you're opening the doors to whatever, you're opening the doors to entities coming in, but you're also opening up people in a way. It is an extremely emotional experience, not just because you are contacting possibly your departed loved ones, but also because there's something special about sitting around a table with your friends and family and opening yourself up to receiving communication. I don't know, every seance we do, it seems to be very surprisingly emotional, I think, for people, because it's just such a unique experience, an experience of togetherness, an experience of trying to do something that seems impossible at any other time. So it's important to set your intention of establishing who you want to contact and why, and that will help you to construct the rest of the details for the seance. Now, you don't want to make it too structured. Mm-hmm. You want to leave time for spirit to sort of give their opinion about which tools you want to use. But you want to cater it to who's there and make sure everyone is feeling safe and comfortable at all times. So if you know you're inviting someone who is still feeling very raw about someone who had passed, or someone whose trauma does come up sometimes in seances because of the level of emotion that comes out of these events. So you really, really want to design the seance around those people and keeping them safe and comfortable. So that's part of it. Then the next part is basically getting the tools you need together. There are many tools you can use for a seance. We love to use pendulums. Mm-hmm. We like to use glass moving with tarot cards, which is very similar. It's a similar idea to the Ouija board, except where you aren't using something that's considered scary to many people. So you're using the glass in a similar way. People are putting their fingers on it and having spirit move around the different tarot cards. We use that because it's symbolic, and spirits tends to prefer communicating in symbolic terms.
At least as far as we've found.
Yes, and many occultists would say similar things.
I agree.
Then we might want to engage in some automatic writing. That's a more quiet time. That's more solitary practice. But I find that that's a good sort of taking a step back and having a moment for a spirit to really start to interact through you rather than interact through the group as a whole. What other tools?
Well, and then we really lean it towards the experiential factor of the event, of the ritual. If you've noticed, as Kat's been talking, she's listing tools that a lot of different tools packed into an 1.5-hour session.
It could be a whole night.
It could be, and most of the time, seances can go anywhere from 1.5 hours to 3 hours, as we've had. But what we find is that what we really want to do is give people a moment to interface with something in the strongest possible way. So not everyone is going to have profound spirit contact through pendulums. Not everyone can scry. We look at this as like gazing mirrors and scrying surfaces. There's a reason that seers exist, and that's because not everyone can be a great seer. Some to various degrees, but not everyone can have a profound experience. So we want to move those along to equip people with the tools that they can use, and then hopefully have some kind of real connection and contact through that. That at the end, we can all discuss then, okay, we've cataloged now for 1.5 hours to 3 hours all of the different weirdness that's happened to us. And now let's talk about it. Let's sit here and kind of decompress. We'll eat some food. Right. We'll drink some water, do some things the dead can't do, and engage with each other around these messages. Crucially, I think, not forcing them to fit any particular person or circumstance, but just kind of reveling in, we got all of this externalized stuff, and now how does it apply? If it does apply, what are the outcomes of it? It's very much, I think of it very much as a paranormal investigation in some ways, but it's not just an investigation into, are there ghosts here? It's an investigation into ourselves as well.
That's such a good point. But I do want to mention, before you're going to do that debrief and closing and eating and really being done, you do have to politely dismiss the spirits and say, okay, we're done. Thank you for coming tonight, really as a good hostess would. Yeah. To any of her guests, as a good hostess to the spirits who have come as well. Say goodbye and good night.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very important. Even when doing a paranormal investigation in a very haunted location, as you leave, you thank them and say, oh, by the way, you're not coming home with me.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, when I leave here, thanks for talking, but this is your space and I'm going to my space, and then do some personal clearing.
Exactly.
And things like that. Now, we were talking about things that the spirits can't do, like drinking water and things. But you also recommend putting kind of an offering or an altar to them, maybe some water in a crystal glass, and you know, something that was relevant to a specific entity that you are wishing to speak to, maybe photos of a loved one, a wristwatch, you know, something, those kind of things, which I found when on your website, Eckharts.com, when you were talking about your seance, Kat, that was a really interesting parallel to what a friend of mine does for a paranormal investigation. She looks after the Watan Tarbell mortuary in Tombstone, Arizona,
Wow.
and opens it up, and Nora sets things up, and she actually sets out shots of whiskey and the bottles from the period, and that is specific to those entities that she commonly has come in. So when you go there, you're going to go have a paranormal investigation, and there she sets all this stuff up. And she says it's very important for them to have something to interact with, and brings a lot more of them forward. In your experience with your seances, and you're dealing with family members, you find that, excuse me, do you find that the altar is really relevant or just semi-relevant?
That's a great question.
I don't think we've ever been able to measure it successfully.
Or have you ever had a seance without one?
We have, yeah. And
I guess they're still the same, I guess, maybe?
well,
They're different.
they're different, but it's different types of, there are different types of interactions that come forward, I think. So for example, when we're doing a digital seance and we're spread out across the country or internationally, and we're logging in through Zoom at a certain time to do a digital seance, people will sometimes follow the instructions we provide and set up their own altar space in their own location with the personal effects or imagery of the spirit they're hoping to contact.
Maybe a bit of wine or a bit of water, whatever they like to drink.
Yeah, and sometimes people will be less compliant and not set anything up. In those cases, we find that there is activity, but it's a little bit more diffuse. It's a little bit less targeted, of course. When we've done in-person seances and worked with families, we do always want to stress having something in the center of the space that's personal, that feels like there's a connection. And we will then accordingly adjust our introductory rites, our calling on the spirits based off of that person. So, for example, if we're trying to contact someone Catholic, we're going to use Catholic saints and prayers as invocation. We're going to maybe work with Mary closely through some of this. We're going to use iconography that spirit knows and that family knows, as opposed to rolling up with Baphomet and just being like, all right, let's contact the dead. Because as you can imagine, that's really not going to be conducive to strong communication. I think it can be very helpful in targeting. And Kat and I have a relationship with the spirits who, you know, are exalted ancestors, our ancestors whom we work with. And they've kind of given us some clues as to what they want in an altar year round. But we don't create offerings year round to spirits that aren't those spirits who have personally disclosed information to us.
In your experience, and we've thrown out the term, I throw out the term entity, you said spirits, ghosts. Do you believe the ones that you were contacting have crossed over? Or are they trapped in ghosts? Or do you, in your mind, are they completely different or the same?
That's a great question.
I think we have different theories, but we don't have set beliefs on this.
Okay.
Because I think it is hard to know for sure, and I am trying to get myself to not believe something so firmly that I cannot be open to information that would come as different than my beliefs. I want to be open. So I try not to settle too heavily on what I believe about the afterlife and what I believe about where kind of the spirits that are speaking to me are really coming from. But that being said, we can't help but have theories because we have our own experiences. And, you know, we have our own beliefs. So I think that for me, I don't really have a belief that the spirits we're communicating with are trapped. I'm calling them to this place to communicate with me. I do think that they have in some ways crossed over. But that being said, I don't think that they've been like reabsorbed into the universal consciousness or however that works, or reincarnated. So I think that they still retain their personalities, their individuality when they're speaking to me, and that they're coming from a place that's out of time. And in other ways, I don't understand.
Yeah. I always hesitate to use the word like trapped, because I think it sets people up for this. It sets them up for, go ahead.
Sorry, the better word would be just hadn't moved.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
A conscious decision not to go, quote unquote, to the light.
Exactly. That I definitely resonate with more strongly. And this kind of shows the limitations of our linguistic capability around this stuff. Because some spirits do hang around. One of the things that Kat and I always talk about is when we're opening a seance and explaining to people what we're about to experience and receive, we often tell individuals that we've never had a bad experience doing a seance. We've never had a demon jump up through the table and flip things around and scream at people. However, we do occasionally run into spirits which seem to feel very needy. And these spirits maybe were needy people in their waking life, in their living life. They may feel as though there's a lot that they still have to accomplish. We particularly see this in cases where maybe people were absent as parents, or there was some kind of trauma in their past, where there's a sense of an urgency on behalf of the spirit that I need to rectify this. I need to express, I can see now the failings or the shortcomings, and I need to make some kind of effort to connect. And I think that's a willingness on behalf of the spirit to stay in a place, to kind of communicate that. And then there may be spaces that just are energetically deeply connected spaces to the spirit world. I hesitate to use terms like fracturing or like discarnate souls, which are bound to a space, mostly because, again, we want to set people up for as positive an experience as we can have together, and to not turn every spirit contact or spirit encounter into, we need to help the spirit to its light, we need to free it from something. Because to an extent, with the paranormal, it does often feel like we co-create to an extent, and spirit will appear as we expect to find it. So these are all the kinds of things that we find we have to balance.
Yeah, in my experience, I found that, there's about 4 reasons why a person doesn't cross over. And one of them is what you were talking about. They still believe they have work to do. And it's fascinating. The way, what brought me to that question was you were talking about using a glass on tarot cards to communicate. And if Uncle Fred rolled his tractor and had never seen a tarot card in his life and hasn't crossed over, and you were using a glass and tarot cards to communicate, he wouldn't know what the heck tarot cards were. But if he had crossed and plugs into the universal consciousness, then that would be a way to use it. So you'd be communicating with somebody who's crossed and not somebody who hadn't.
Yeah, this is a good point. Similarly, we try and engage on that linguistic or that imagery level, because hopefully some of those things we can at least get a hit on. So for example, in this tractor rolling hypothetical, if, this person is stuck or feels as though there's something they need to communicate, hopefully the death card makes sense. Hopefully death is something we can move to. And from there, we can build out into other modes of communication.
Yeah,
sometimes, go ahead.
It's hard though, because you and I know that death is like a new beginning. The death card isn't as one-dimensional as it looks.
Exactly.
But the guy who doesn't know what the death card is going, oh, you use that card because I died.
Exactly.
Like, okay, but what if we look at it through, oh, it's an opening, it's a beginning. And he keeps pointing at the new beginning, and you're going, oh, well, what my image of a death card is, and somebody who's never seen tarot is going to be wonky. But I see your point. You know, I sorry, I didn't mean to jump on the death card, but I see your point in using imagery as opposed to, you know, the written, like, 9 of cups or swords or whatever those weird. I do oracle cards. Tarot cards are baffling. But yeah. And plus, when I got taught how to do oracle cards, I said, okay, here's the book on all the oracle cards. Throw it away. Now just go do your thing and you'll get it. So, oh, that makes sense. And then all of a sudden, yeah, I was getting the info. But you as being, and you and Kat are mediums, so you're the in-between from the other side to whoever is wanting to communicate. To open yourself, how do you switch that part of yourself on? How do you get ready to come in and say, okay, I'm open? Not so much, or do you so basically teach everybody at the table how to do that? Or you just kind of, okay, I'm going to take this job. You guys sit back and be the audience. How do you process that?
We like to try and give everybody some chance to maneuver into that role, to ease into that space, because it is a journey. And a lot of people have more mediumistic experiences than they give themselves credit for, because there's a bit of, you know, conversation around claiming that title. What does it mean to walk into a space and say, I'm a medium?
I am capable of receiving messages from spirit. I think people would have an easier time saying that versus saying, I am a medium. I can be the medium in this seance. For us, I think we do a little bit of both acting as the medium and also making sure that people have the ability and the space to receive messages. So what that looks like is Dan and I will finish our facilitation. We'll finish, I guess by that point, I would have done some automatic writing. And then we do it looks most like a seance at this point. We sit around the table if we can, or if we're doing it online, we take a moment and we breathe together. So we're starting to shift our mind state from using the frontal lobe, from the planning, from the non-creative side to the more, okay, we're being more relaxed. We're opening ourselves up more together. We do our grounding. So we're doing kind of a meditative portion. And I do that, and Dan does that in our own selves. So we kind of do it at the same time. Instead of doing it in our minds, we do it out loud. So we're all trying to get into almost like a trance-like state. And then I think Dan and I, we get into it more quickly than others. So we'll start with some messages that we are feeling, that we're hearing. And then we really invite people to communicate when they're experiencing things.
Exactly.
And the whole of our seance is to kind of foster a safe group environment where people feel comfortable speaking. When they're feeling something, where people feel comfortable sharing that experience.
And then a lot of that is empowering people when we're in that space to say, like, for example, Kat and I may have picked up on something, and this is, I think, the important part of being a good facilitator is as we move through our earlier exercises, which are all in many ways like both grounding exercises and initiatory, like contact exercises. Kat and I's role as facilitator is to kind of help parse. So for example, going back to our tarot card session, if something's coming through and not making a lot of sense, that might be something Kat and I focus on in automatic writing or in channeling to see what's coming through there. Like, why does this not feel like, why does this feel frustrated? What's the connection point there? And as someone who's a little bit more experienced between the two of us, like, we can provide that. But then we also wants to have people in a space where they can feel comfortable, and then honestly just share with us what's happening. If nothing happens, please share that you're not experiencing anything right now. And what does that lack of experience feel like? Because that alone can be something we can talk about.
Right.
So it's really, at that point, I think people are often surprised at how much they experience and how much they are plugged in before the evening is over, without maybe having considered themselves to be spirit contact professionals. When mediums come to our seance, we definitely share the floor with them because they have a lot of insight as well. So people will ask us, like, why should a medium attend a seance? Which is a great question, because mediums are already kind of plugged in. But if we view seance as a ritual where we're amplifying energy, amplifying emotion, pinging off of each other, then mediums can have very profound experiences, maybe more profound than they're used to, or maybe just having more context to see how other people's skills and abilities work.
You put on digital seances. You were talking about that earlier. How often do you do that?
So we'll do a digital seance quarterly right now. And what that means in a digital seance is we actually send you a box of supplies. We send you some seance material because many people don't have the things they feel they would want for a seance. So for example, we'll send you a pendulum, we send you a scrying mirror, we send you some protective materials, in this case, a sigil and a talisman, as well as some protective salts if you'd like them. And that is really to help kind of ground and create a space, an anchor for people to really attach themselves to, since we are separated by digital, divide. So those happen quarterly. They're limited to 15 people, and they are very much a representation of what happens if you were to join us live. And then monthly, Kat and I do our spirit summoning, which are just essentially monthly readings where we try and read for as many people as we can. And that's also in a Zoom space, but that lacks the, the immersive physical component of sitting and waiting for perhaps, 3 hours as we engage in like really deep spirit communication. That's more readings oriented.
Yeah, and people can go to Eckharts, the Eckharts.com and read a little bit more about that. And that's ECKHARTS.
That's right.
Yeah, the Eckharts.com. In your experience with your seances, actually, I got to go back to Kat. You just were describing the dark, shadowy image in Dan's bedroom a few years back, and then looking away and then looking back, and the feeling you got about it. Did you say that you don't believe it was actually what I'll call a spirit or an entity, that it was something possibly made by thought? Or did I misinterpret that?
Yes. So because of the quality of Dan's experiences, a lot of negative experiences, a lot of no clearing at all. Yeah. We now think it might have been what is called a thought form, an entity that has no will, has no intention, that's basically a physical, in some ways, expression of a long-term and very powerful, very emotional thought or feeling. It might have been a thought form. It might have been an entity or a spirit of some type. But yeah, I'm open to different classifications of it. It just, being that it appeared to me as this very black, tall figure that was ominous. It didn't feel like it was communicating anything. It just felt like it was there, like it was oppressive. And I think that is similar to how you felt.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Looking back, I would also agree.
Very connected to you.
It did. Way. And it's one of those things, I think, of growing up in a space where you're trying to process all of these like weird experiences, and your only programming you have, or only language you have, is that this is something scary. And whether at one time or another it was actually just a random spirit or lesser entity or what have you, that just kind of hung around and got fed off of emotion, I think that's probably far more likely than it being some kind of, again, discarnate soul or spirit that had a profound message. And simply because the only existence that it seemed to have was one of just introducing dread and hanging around to be scary.
And it seemed non-human, which makes me think that it wouldn't be considered like a ghost in that way.
Okay. Yeah, because it's almost what you're describing is a more mellow poltergeist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, something that's created, like, you know who had that bedroom before you?
I don't actually. No. Yeah, I wish I did. I wish I had more information, but the people who my parents bought it from, by all accounts, they were normal. By all accounts, it was just a normal, family. And that may be the case. Maybe it's just something residual, but.
Yeah, that's what we found with poltergeists. Someone says, there's things, my daughter's bedroom, things are being thrown off the wall. And you're going, oh, your daughter's like going through puberty right now? Yeah, how did you know that?
Yeah.
And she's got some other trauma that we're not going to get into, but that whole, books are flying and things like that. I think there's a ghost. When we go there, there's no ghost. It's just energy. Mm-hmm. And the word will stick to the poltergeist. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a reason why we feel like when we're doing facilitation or speaking on these things, we really want to empower people to have an experience with the paranormal. And it can even be a negative experience, but understand within the framework they're in mostly in control. And these things are rarely as malevolent or terrifying as we make them out to be in our own heads. Part of that is pop culture. Part of that is, growing up in the wake of the satanic panic and still kind of dealing with the repercussions of that as a society. But we've had quite a few paranormal investigations with poltergeists where people were like, I'm just so afraid it's demons. And it's not demons. It's just some negative energy and some anxiety. And if you ignore it, it's going to go away.
Right. Ignore it and do some
therapy, cleansing. Yeah.
Practical things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my friend who's a psychic and I, we cleared a ghost out of a person's house here yesterday. Mm. And there was 2 elemental beings there. She said, I keep seeing these things and they're making a lot of noise. They're little flashes that corner my eyes and they must be ghosts. And the psychic did a remote view and said, oh no, they're from the land. They're just running all over the place. They like it there. And they keep, for some reason, going to a refrigerator. And the psychic didn't know that this woman had challenges with the refrigerator, like somebody tapping on the door all the time, the refrigerator. And she says, for some reason, they're fascinated with it. They think it's not working properly. And so we had to make a deal with the elemental beings to try not to be so noisy and let me sleep and don't come in the bedroom, but you can hang out on the couch. And they were good with that. But we had to cross over her ex-boyfriend who was causing all sorts of problems. But it's one of those things. You do have other beings that are around. And if somebody doesn't know what an elemental being is and is maybe the religious background, might just say, oh, it's a demon. Yeah, I have demons in my house. They're little, I see them out of the corner of my eye. They're running, they're scattering all over the place. I have demons in my house. And it's like, yeah, well, actually check to see. Yeah. And that's, again, that can lead to places where you then do experience things that feel very demonic, or you do experience things that feel very unfortunate or aggressive or unsettling. Yeah. So, yeah, not all elemental beings are nice. Yeah. The majority are, but not all of them. And especially if jumping on somebody whose vibration drops really low and just kind of sucking their energy, it's just horrible. But, you know, we as living humans, our vibration's high to start with. Dead human, no matter how high your vibration was when you were alive, if you're going to be a ghost, it's going to be low. And and you end up following higher vibration people home. Do you guys ever have dead people following you home? So
Fortunately, none of our guests ever do. We do a lot of protection work around that to make sure people don't have that experience, because they are already primed for it. They already have, watched the movie where the ghost followed them home in the backseat of the car. We live in a space that is very, very active. And I do sometimes wonder if those are things that we've picked up, even though we do a lot of clearing, a lot of banishing. We are magically operant, so we do as much as we can, but we do live in a very old, very haunted space in a very, very haunted town. And so it is something that we're constantly kind of pushing against.
Are you near the water?
We are.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're near train tracks, a river.
And probably a big creek running underneath the house.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Everything but quartz and silver in the ground.
Yep. It runs, there's literally a river that runs under this building all the way down through the town, a creek underwater. It is a profoundly energetic town. It's known for Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings,
ghosts.
And it seems to call people like us, even though it doesn't have a reputation that I've found online for being a space for Salem is all the witches moved to Salem, This space is very much like you're talking to people on the street, and then it turns out that they're like, oh, I found these jail cells from the 1700s in my basement when I was doing a renovation project. And also I worked on Project Blue Book. It's a very weird liminal, what are we doing here?
Yeah, there was a TV series, about the Headless Horseman, I can't think of it anymore. It's about the town in your area back in the day, the guy who was fighting the Headless Horseman. But whatever that town was called, it was a TV series not too long ago, and everything that was woo-woo happened in that town. It was kind of bizarre. But the here on the West Coast, one of the most haunted places in my area is an 1800s train station. And the railway tracks are actually, some of them are on kind of a decking over top of a river. Mm. So anywhere around the railway tracks, or and then there's buildings built on solid rock, and that rock runs under the river. And those buildings are all friggin' woo-woo. Every dead person in town kind of wants to go there because it's just good energy, and it's and of course they can tap into that to be seen and to move things. Anywhere there's a place, Victoria, British Columbia. It's on the tip of Vancouver Island, where the tide squeezes between there and northern Washington State twice a day, and it's one of the places to go see dead people. The First Nations 2,000 years ago used to travel all the way down the island to speak to their dead at the tip. They could have spoke to their dead where they were, but they could actually see them when they got to the tip, because the dead would come with them. And then they just tap into that amazing energy. And your house being in a place with a river running underneath it and water around it and railway tracks, and it's one of those little, you're sitting on a generator basically. Yeah.
No, that's really what we find. So within that, there are lots of conversations about, what do you do to both benefit from that, and then also negate the effects that you don't want to deal with all the time, right? There's a profound benefit to that, and I think people, sometimes overlook spirits of place when they're wanting to achieve things from a magical perspective. Working as best you can, or making not necessarily deals, but
fostering
relationships is a very powerful thing to do, especially in a space like this. But once you begin making relationships with some of these entities, others show up and are like, hey, me too,
And they have for us. But as you had an experience with your friend, you just say, okay, you know what? I need you to not make noise at this time because I need to get sleep. You can live in my area, but don't do this. Stay on the couch.
Yeah. There's negotiation, and then there's, and we've all tried to at the beginnings of our experience with the paranormal, try to smudge a space to clear it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it really wants to stay there, it just waits outside till the smoke clears and comes back in.
Yeah.
So, but if you do it enough, they'll get the picture like, oh, I guess you really don't want me here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just tell them you don't want them there.
Exactly.
And they'll move on. Or a lot of cases, they come to me because they think I can help them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that until I can talk to somebody who's actually got a better communications line with the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, oh, no, it only came to you because it knows that you know so-and-so, and so-and-so clears them or crosses them. So it's the only reason it showed up.
Yeah.
So, okay, fine. We'll deal with that. I'll pass them off to so-and-so. But they were local. So the dead person was local, let's say, where I was in a location. I was on the Queen Mary, got my sheets pulled off my bed.
Oh, wow.
And was a tad scared. But I built a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing was supposed to come in my bubble. And I found out later, I did an EVP session because I had my gear, and I said, were you trying to get my attention? Yes. Did you want some help? Yes. Okay, let me sleep tonight and we'll figure that out when I get home. Sure enough, it was a fellow we crossed over.
Mm-hmm.
The first adult that actually came through the bubble that I usually built, dead children will come through it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when I build the bubble, this was the first time an adult came through, but it was like, okay, this is my chance to go. So I'm going to go do it. How do you guys protect yourself? How do you, first of all, how do you shut off?
Mm-hmm.
How do we shut off?
Yeah.
Turn that off. Like do you walk around open all the time?
No.
No, we don't do that. That is too much for us, we find. And we find usually when it's inconvenient for us, we're not in really a place to help any spirits or to communicate to anyone. We're kind of going about our business. So I think we do a couple of things. One thing is we create space to engage with spirit. So the dual benefit of our spirit summonings and our digital seances are that spirits know that that's when they're going to be able to talk to us. So they don't necessarily have to interrupt. They know that they're going to come to us. We're going to call them and they're going to come to us. The other thing is we have daily practices. We have daily automatic writing sessions, and we have daily readings that we do for our own benefit and for whatever spirits are wanting to come through in those particular ways during those times. So by giving them sort of space to communicate with us, they don't feel like they have to do it other times as well. But we also aren't open during those other times. We're going out and saying, okay, I'm going to focus on my tasks so then I could focus on being a medium, basically.
Exactly. I've always been knowing my experience as like someone who comes from I come from a Pennsylvania Dutch background. And the Pennsylvania Dutch culture is one that's pretty closed off. It's pretty like, I know you, I know my family, I know my neighbors, but I'm not going to go out and have like this huge conversation with some random person in the grocery store. I don't know that person. That was a shock to me when I moved, even just as simply as moving to Maryland, which isn't that far away, but a different cultural vibe. If people want to stand around and chat in grocery stores or what have you on the street.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. And I never wanted to be the medium who comes up to someone and says, your grandfather's right here and I need to tell you this story, simply because I know how uncomfortable that would make me if that happened to me. And I feel like I would bring all of that discomfort into that interaction because that's not my mode of being. So for me, it was very important to set up to schedules essentially and say like from this time to this time every day, you have my ear and I am willing to talk and have an engagement and a conversation. We do offer, incense, some food and drink, depending on who we're working with or what relationships we've built. And then outside of that, we're not going to be available. And what we find is that the spirits that are very respectful of that are the ones that often want to be helped the most. Spirits that show up and are just aggressively needy at times outside of that window. In our experience, they've been the ones that don't necessarily follow through or are interested in making a connection in a way that's a nuisance as opposed to a way that's beneficial. So that's just a general rule of thumb for us.
Yeah, I should note that sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes spirits do come through because, it happens.
Yeah.
And as far as like, what do we do to protect ourselves? We do have daily protection rituals, light banishing rituals, just so we can like sleep and be relaxed.
Yeah.
And then we're very careful about our space. We do a lot of cleaning and we do some clearing.
Yeah. And that cleaning can be very mundane too. It's literally just literal cleaning. And we like to point that out because in cases where we want the paranormal to increase, there is a argument to be made for living an anti-structural life, to letting things get a little out of hand, not sticking to a schedule, being very liminal yourself. So if we find that we want to ramp things down or things are getting a little too aggressive, sometimes it's as simple as saying, okay, we really haven't had a schedule for the past week outside of these 2 events and these bunch of interviews. So now, we're going to hit the schedule hard, waking up at this time, doing this thing, clean the space. And that seems to ramp those things back down. It decreases the liminal nature. Yeah,
I was at right across from the battle site for the Battle of Little Bighorn in Montana. There's the First Nations, or the band there, has a store and a restaurant. And downstairs is all the storage, and it's cluttered, and it's friggin' filled with ghosts. And they're not, and I don't mean ghosts like from 500 yards away where the Battle of Little Bighorn was. They're ghosts like a kid who was killed in a car accident a couple of years ago, that kind of thing. And a couple of old farmers and a couple of cowboys and that kind of like cowboy-ish looking people. And the little kid she was hiding behind boxes because at the other end of the building was these older guys that she didn't like because they were gruff. It was like, holy cow. But it was cluttered. But upstairs, where it was all clean, nothing. Because it was structure and scheduling, and it was kept clean. And she would love to come upstairs, but she was afraid she'd be seen. And so she was around all the boxes. And where I used to live, we had a big basement, and it was just boxes in it. And there was a ghost in the basement. And my oldest daughter, who's a really high empath, as an infant, or as a little toddler, and then up into walking stages, she would never go to the basement without her little sister or anyone else, because she could feel the thing there. And we finally had to cross it over. But again, I was told it's because it was just a cluttered space, and they feel at home and comfortable in that cluttered space. Yeah, there's a location in this town that is currently used as a townhouse, like a municipal building, essentially. It's a historical site that the town office, the mayor and stuff operate out of. And they have a 3rd floor space that used to be the bedroom for the original owner and his children. And for a while, they were just throwing filing papers and stuff up there, and like exercise equipment and junk. And they had a terrible experience with things. They would be working during the day and hearing stuff bumping along upstairs. And eventually they moved everything into the basement and put more office space upstairs than where the bedrooms used to be. And that weird, like, misplaced items, noises, hearing people walking up and down the steps, that all moved from that 3rd floor back down to the basement. So the weirdness didn't go away. It just followed the anti-structure. Yeah, weird. Yeah, it's fascinating. In your experience and your years of doing the seances, do you have some really good, bizarre experiences that you can share with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which ones should we do?
I know.
Which of the many? Did anyone die? No, I'm kidding.
Fortunately, no one has become part of the seance while partaking in it just yet. But Kat, do you have anything that springs immediately to mind for you?
I think Dan and I are mostly excited by the physical manifestations.
Yes, that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are excited by like the messages that are true and shocking and super relevant even at the time, and those are amazing to us as well. but the physical manifestations for us are a little more rare than that. So we're always excited when we see something move, or we hear something. And there's been so many seances.
One of the weirdest, and we love this story because I think when you deal with the paranormal to someone who's not very involved in the paranormal, they wonder, like, they just think you've kind of like seen it all. Like, oh yeah, of course, like nothing's going to really get under your skin, or you're not going to have a experience that you can't like rationalize away as part of the paranormal like world. And the one that we have to really always sit with is this manifestation that occurred in the Westminster Burial Ground in Maryland. It's where Edgar Allan Poe is buried, actually. And there are some, well, essentially the church had a graveyard in the city, and they ran out of space in the city of Baltimore. They ran out of space and then had to build their church over the graveyard. They were just, yeah. So the church was put up on these deep like brick risers and stuff, and it sits over the burial ground. So they created like a reverse catacomb. And when you're inside those like reverse catacombs, that space that has, you know, buried people in it, they have some wooden pews down there and like a TV with some like historical documentary going when they do tours. And then these above ground plots, these spaces where there's been erosion, there's been just, you know, the wear and tear of years. And in some cases there are weird, you know, skeletal-like protrusions. So it's a really weird space to be in. And we were doing a seance there where everyone was seated in the pews. We were going through the whole invocation. We dimmed the lights down and we received all these interesting messages, and people had these really like, I would say very active experiences of like, not just feeling someone put their shoulder on, but feeling like someone grabbed their hand and like hold it in the seance, like a hand that wasn't there, that sort of thing. And when it ended, we brought the lights up, and covering the pews where people were sitting was this red glass. It looked like river glass, or like a bottle that had been broken in the ocean and worn down by sand. It was smooth. But the glass patterning of this red glass matched exactly the patterning of our red lantern that we had during the course of the seance. We light a candle and we place it in there. Our lantern was fine. There was no breakage on it or anything like that. The glass was not in that space when we all walked into the space. It's run by a university. They own the plot now, and they let us in with a security guard who unlocks everything. Security guard came and got us. We left as a group. So no one was there before us that we're aware of, unless it was a cleaning person or someone from the grounds. And no one was there after. But people remarked feeling this like small pelting, something falling on their head, their shoulders during the seance. And then there was this red glass everywhere. The only thing in the literature that could be is apports, spirit apportation, something physically manifest. But that's something that I personally have a really hard time with, because as much as I'm familiar with, you know, spirit contact in a mental way or in a physical sensation of like something touching me, I've never had such a profound experience of something becoming corporeal, something becoming into this existence. I still lay awake at night and I have no real rational explanation for it, but there's part of me that says you cannot say this was an apport, because it just is so unbelievable and weird.
But it happens to other people.
So maybe it is.
Now, could you get it to bring gold or something next time?
Wouldn't you like that?
Like I got you some glass. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Close to a ruby, but no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. My greed is asking for this.
We have had some interesting experiences moving things to the online sphere. Spirit communication has been different since involving more modern day technology. And we have had, I feel like even spirit summoning, We have weird interactions with Spotify will open up and start to play. We've been kicked out of our own meeting, the only ones, when I was in contact with a spirit who didn't like mediums.
Yes.
And her daughter was there on the event and told us she hated mediums.
Yeah,
and that's why you were kicked out.
Yeah, so we have these weird technological experiences. One of the strangest is when people see like shadowy figures moving on the screen, but moving
behind the other people.
Like behind them, moving from Zoom window to Zoom window. So like standing behind someone here and then going over to you behind you, James. But like, what is that? Because
I know.
Yeah.
Why would spirit not manifest on the other side of the camera?
Like,
it wants to be seen, and it's such a unique and weird experience of being like, we're all seeing this, and this thing is here, and it could have been anywhere else, but it's here.
And later we were told by the person who other people saw this, I guess, entity, this shadowy figure on her screen. She said, "Oh, I have a trickster spirit that lives with me."
Yeah, so take that for what you will.
Guess those elementals again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Lokis and
Sometimes they like attention.
they do.
yeah. Yeah, it's sharing space. It's just sharing space and sharing and being around others, the energy of others.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a interesting story about a restaurant in Sedona, Arizona, where in the dining room, actually this was on the Dead Files. Amy Allen went in and she could see dead people in chairs. Like they were props, but some beings were controlling them. And basically when a ghost was like walking by ghosts are everywhere, walking down the street, these things would take them and they would set them in the restaurant. And some people would see them. People would come into the restaurant and crap, run out. And those who were sensitive and Amy said, yeah, you've got to we can't get rid of whatever these beings are, but we can have them release all the dead people and then we'll make a deal and, we'll negotiate a shared space thing. And
Yeah.
And they made a deal. They got a great big kind of brass sculpture of cowboys and had it at the front for many years. And then the owner sold it. So I'm pretty sure all the beings are back collecting dead people again. But yeah, it's weird. They a shared space. They liked hanging out with us.
Yeah.
That's just some do.
Yeah.
Like-
Well, I mean, there's a limited amount of space on this earth, so we kind of have to share.
Yeah.
Some of us.
It's an interesting kind of overlap of energy and of people. And it is a wider world. So tapping into that can be, well, it can be really overwhelming for some people. So that's our role, I guess, is to kind of help step into that in a way that's productive.
And you guys are on the Facebook. You are on Instagram. What was the other one? Oh, TikTok.
Yes. Oddly enough, we were just messing around on TikTok, and then within like 2 months had like 50,000 followers on TikTok. So people love ghosts and people love seances and mediumship. So we're at the dot, like a little period, Eckharts on both Instagram and TikTok. We are more active on Instagram simply because we're elder millennials and don't actually quite understand TikTok.
I'm on TikTok. I think I've got 12 followers. But I don't put a lot of stuff on there anyway. It's just little bits and pieces. Dan and Kat Eckhart, the Eckharts.com. And again, that's ECKHARTS, Eckharts.
Yes.
It's at Pennsylvania Dutch. So if anybody's out there wants to drop by and say hi. And if you're interested in joining them on their, was it quarterly seance, digital seance? That'll be cool. Do you see you guys opening up to seances again, like locally where you are soon?
Oh, most likely. We're talking with a few locations about July and August. Things in Maryland are, obviously we always have to be mindful of the current situation, but things are developing well. So we'd like to get back. I'm sure we'll make big announcements when we're doing live events again. Well, in-person events.
Do you guys do conferences when after, post-apocalypse as we get
Definitely.
better?
I'm sure we'll have a lot to share.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, I really want to thank you for dropping by. This has been fun.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I enjoyed talking with you.
And I'm probably going to get back a hold of you when it's a little bit more open and people are traveling again, because I'd love to touch base with you on some of the activities that you guys host in your area, and see if you do have a couple of not so much like the personal ones where we want to talk to Uncle Fred who died last Wednesday, but it's like the ones you just can open up and say, look, if we get some people down now. Kat, how many people what's your max on a seance? Is it 15-ish?
It depends. 15 is our max generally. Sometimes 13 is our max. It depends on if it's like a family or if it's public.
Yeah, when we're doing public, we think that capping out around 15 is about where, because there are only two of
You
us.
can control the situation.
Yeah, and the more people who come in, the more energies they bring in, the more spirits they bring in. And we want to keep things, generally we strive to keep things under 3 hours, because it's just a lot if we're there all night long.
That's not for
Yeah, it would be. And they're about an hour and a half longish, but have gone as long as 3.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That is so cool. I want to do it now.
Well, thank you.
You're invited.
You're always invited.
It's a long walk. But next time I'm out on your side of the planet, which I have to go because my family, I got to go back to my family. Part of my family arrived in North America in Massachusetts in 1628. So I'm going to go make a land claim. No, no. I'm gonna go claim some land that they claimed from somebody else. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes. All right, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for showing up.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great.
Experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee plant has to offer. Now, here are the oracles with James Tyson.